What does USPAP provide? A common basis for comparison. What does USPAP provide? A reference source for all users. What does USPAP provide? A basis for uniform enforcement for state regulatory agencies. What does USPAP provide? A reason for clients and intended users to place their trust in the services performed by appraisers. 1930. First groups of professional appraisers. 1980s committee. Ad hoc committee created to develop professional appraisal standards. The Appraisal Foundation. Created in 1987 by 8 U.S. appraisal organizations. 4 boards created by TAF. The Board of Trustees, the Appraisal Qualifications Board, the Appraisal Standards Board, the Appraisal Practices Board. 2010 TAF created Board. The Appraisal Practices Board. The Appraisal Practices Board provides timely voluntary guidance to appraisers in the form of valuation advisories on recognized valuation methods and techniques. In order to work for the public's best interest, the appraiser must act independently, impartially, objectively, competently, and with integrity. FRA 1989. Title 11 Financial Institutions Reform and Recovery Enforcement Act, also known as S&L Bailout Bill. Recognition of USPAP. Title 11 Congress and Executive Branches Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Circular 129 Office of Management and Budget 1993 IRS 2006-46 Fannie, Freddie, Farm Credit Administration Worldwide IRC. What is TAF? A private agency and not a government entity. What is TAF? TAF and its boards have no legal oversight or enforcement authority in any jurisdiction. USPAP achieves legal authority by adoption, citation, or implementation by government agencies through regulation or administrative actions, or by private enterprise in the form of contract requirements. TAF categories of sponsors: appraisal sponsors, affiliate sponsors, international sponsors. TAF Advisory Councils. TAFEC, the Appraisal Foundation Advisory Council, IAC Industry Advisory Council, VFG Valuers Global Forum. TAF Bottom. The governing body of TAF secures funding, appoints members, and provides oversight of APB, AQB, ASB. How many members of TAF Bottom? 25. TAF-APB issues voluntary guidance on recognized valuation methods and techniques. TAF-AQB issues qualification requirements for supervisory, trainee, licensed and certified appraisers. TAF-ASB publishes appraiser standards USPAP. AQB functions: minimum education criteria, qualification criteria, creates and maintains exams, administers USPAP courses, certifies instructors, real estate degree programs. ASB functions: primary responsibility for USPAP review TAF education materials that deal with USPAP advisory opinions and FAQ that may not be part of USPAP and are therefore not enforceable. ASB and AQB work together on the National USPAP Course and USPAP Instructor Cert and Recert exams. APB function: voluntary guidance on valuation methods and techniques. USPAP is developed, interpreted, and amended by Appraisal Standards Board. The guidance issued by APB is voluntary. Advisory opinions are not part of USPAP but included as reference material. ASC functions. Created by Titles IF Area in 1989 to ensure the government has sufficient control over appraisal activity, monitors the activities of TAF. What is the ASC? The Appraisal Subcommittee, a federal entity with a supervisory role. FFIEC, Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council. FFIEC function. Created by FIRA, head of ASC, federal body prescribe principles, standards, report forms, and recommendations for uniformity of financial institutions. How many members in the ASC? 7. ASC members represent the Federal Reserve System, Office of the Comptroller, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, National Credit Union Administration, HUD, Federal Housing Finance Agency, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Who regulates state appraiser criteria? ASC. State agency functions. Monitored by ASC, discipline appraisers, create extra sets of standards, issues credentials to appraisers, creates appraisal qualifications. USPAP IV. Forward history of USPAP lists ASB board members and revisions. USPAP V. Table of contents. USPAP layout. 1. Definitions PG 1, 2 Preamble page 6 3 Rules Ethics PG 8-16 Record keeping Competency Scope of work Jurisdictional exception for Standards 1 to 10 Telephone 17-71 5 Statements on Appraisal Standard 73 End. Appraisal process. Define the problem, determine scope of work, data collection and analysis, application of approaches to value, reconciliation of indicators and final opinion, report opinion. Under FIRA, USPAP is enforced by state appraiser licensing and certification agencies. USPAP Preamble identifies the purpose of USPAP to promote and maintain a high level of public trust in professional appraisal practice and to establish minimum requirements for professional appraisal practice. What are the steps an appraiser takes? Identify intended user, identify intended use, identify definition of value, effective date of opinion, identify property characteristics, extraordinary assumptions, hypothetical conditions. Step 2 Evaluation process. Determine scope of work. Data collection and analysis. Market analysis and highest and best use analysis. Market analysis. Demand studies, supply studies, marketability studies. Highest and best use analysis. Site as though vacant, ideal improvement, property as improved. Application of approaches to value. Cost, sales comparison, income capitalization. Step 5 Evaluation process. Reconciliation of value indications and final opinion of value. Step 6 Evaluation process. Report opinion of value. Why the need for higher appraisal standards? Episodes of economic turmoil generated the need. Market value. Not defined by USPAP, the recognized authority, regulatory agency, legal jurisdiction, bankruptcy court, body of knowledge, or specific to the client's intended use. Bias. A preference or inclination that precludes an appraiser's impartiality, independence, or objectivity in an assignment. Impartially. A mental state that does not favor one side over another. Assumption. That which is taken to be true. Extraordinary assumption. An assumption directly related to a specific assignment as of the effective date of the assignment results, which if found to be false, could alter the appraiser's opinions and conclusions, presumes as fact otherwise uncertain information. Hypothetical condition. A condition directly related to a specific assignment which is contrary to what is known by the appraiser to exist on the effective date of the assignment results but is used for the purpose of analysis, appraisal contrary to its actual known condition. Exposure time. Cost. The amount required to create, produce, or obtain a property, a fact or estimate of the fact. Price. The amount asked, offered, or paid for a property, price become fact. Value. The monetary relationship between properties and those who buy, sell, or use those properties. An opinion. The type and definition of value must be identified for every appraisal. Estimate of fact. Reproduction cost developed by an appraiser. Fact. Sale price. Opinion. The value of the property. Appraiser. One who is expected to perform valuation services competently and in a manner that is independent, impartial, and objective. An appraiser is expected to perform competently, independently, impartially, objectively. Client. The party or parties who engage by employment or contract an appraiser in a specific assignment, an individual, group, or entity, and may engage and communicate with the appraiser directly or through an agent, not necessarily payee. Assignment. An agreement between an appraiser and a client to provide valuation service or the valuation service that is provided as a consequence of such an agreement. Assignment results. An appraiser's opinions or conclusions develop specific to an assignment, not limited to value, the quality of another appraiser's work or valuation service other than an appraisal or review, not physical characteristics. Confidential information. Information that is either identified by the client as confidential and is not available from any other source, is classified as confidential by applicable law or regulation. Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. The client. The party or parties who engage the appraiser in an assignment may engage the appraiser through an agent. Intended use. The use of an appraiser's reported appraisal assignment opinions and conclusions as identified by the appraiser based on communication with the client at the time of the assignment determines definition of value. Intended user. The client and any other party is identified by name or type as users of the appraisal on the basis of communication with the client at time of assignment. Advisory Opinion 36. Identification and disclosure of client, intended use and intended user. Scope of work. The type and extent of research and analyses in an appraisal or review assignment determined after determining the intended use. Agents do not necessarily need to be identified unless required by law. FAQ 114. Who makes the identification of the intended use? The appraiser. Who is always an intended user? The client. Report. Any communication, written or oral, of an appraisal that is transmitted to the client upon completion. Oral reports. Record-keeping rule included to cover court testimony and other oral communications of an appraisal. Signature. Personalized evidence indicating authentication of work performed by the appraiser and the acceptance of responsibility for content analysis and the conclusions in the report. Work file. Documentation necessary to support an appraiser's analysis, opinions, and conclusions. Additional oral report. An over-the-phone request for information by the client must include a written summary of the oral report, and a signed and dated certification must be included in the work file. Valuation services. Services pertaining to aspects of property value may be done by appraisers and non-appraisers. Appraisal practice. Valuation services performed by an individual acting as an appraiser, including but not limited to appraisal and appraisal review, not done by a non-appraiser. Appraisal review. The act or process of developing and communicating an opinion about the quality of another appraiser's work that was performed as part of an appraisal or review assignment. Appraisal practice is a subset of valuation services. Comparative Market Analysis (CMA). A valuation service. What is the work that the appraiser performs in order to arrive at his or her opinions and conclusions? The scope of work. USPAP standards. 10, 4 and 5 retired. A benchmark used to measure performance like ethics and competency, composed of standards rules. Standards 1, 2, 7, 8 and 9, 10. Address development and reporting. Standard 3. Addresses both development and reporting of an appraisal review. Standard 6. Addresses development and reporting of a mass appraisal. 1 is compliance with USPAP required. When the service or appraiser is required by law, regulation or agreement with the client or intended user. Which appraisal services are covered by USPAP? Appraisal, appraisal review, anyone who provides a service and represents themselves as an appraiser. What types of property does USPAP cover? Tangible and intangible. When should an individual comply with USPAP? When choosing to represent oneself as an appraiser. What does it mean to act as an appraiser? Representing oneself as an appraiser, an expectation of competence in the service being provided, expectation that the service will be independent, impartial and objective. Appraiser's 3 responsibilities. Identify the capacity in which he is performing and inquire about intended users' expectations. Not misrepresent himself when performing services outside of appraisal practice. Choose to provide a service with taking great care not to violate public trust. Record-keeping rule. Appraiser must maintain the data, information, and analyses necessary to support their opinions for an assignment. Services included in appraisal practice but have no specific performance standards. Provide sales data for general properties, not specific property. Measuring services, writing an article, verifying zoning and potential uses, analyzing elements of value such as reproduction cost or functional utility. Valuation services outside of appraisal practice. Attorney, accountant, broker, consultant must inform the client they are working outside of appraisal practice. USPAP compliance. Advisory Opinion 21/AO21 provides advice regarding the applicability of USPAP in appraisal practice and valuation service. Laws that require appraisers to use USPAP. FOREA, individual state laws. Regulations that require appraisers to use USPAP. HUD, VA, state enforcement agencies. Agreements between appraisers and clients that require appraisers to use USPAP. Whenever there is an agreement to do so. The preamble states that USPAP is for appraisers and users of appraisal services. Ethics rule. Establishes the personal obligations and responsibilities of individual appraisers, promote and preserve public trust, not misrepresenting his role when providing a service outside of appraisal practice, certify compliance with USPAP, communicate in a manner that is not misleading. Ethics rule sections. Conduct management, confidentiality. Ethics rule activities. General conduct development, communication. Ethics rule conduct. Page 8 must perform ethically and competently, must perform in accordance with USPAP, must not engage in criminal conduct, must not knowingly violate the record-keeping rule. Ethics conduct obligations related to development. Impartiality, objectively, independently, without personal interest, without bias. Do not advocate. Do not report predetermined opinions. Do not misrepresent yourself. Do not use unsupported conclusions regarding demographics. Do not be grossly negligent. Ethics conduct on communication and reporting. Do not mislead or defraud or allow anyone else to knowingly and willfully defraud. Ethics conduct disclosure. Requires to disclose any current or prospective interest in the property or the parties involved. Disclose if the appraiser has provided services regarding the subject property within 3 years prior to the assignment. Is an appraiser allowed to purchase a property that he has appraised or is appraising? Yes, as long as the appraiser makes the appropriate disclosures of any and all services performed at the property and performs the assignment independently, impartially, and objectively and without bias. Certification section of report. The appraiser must state their relationship to the property with yes, I've had relationship, or no, I have no relationship as an appraiser or any other service within the previous 3 years, unless the client asks the appraiser to keep the previous relationship confidential. What 2 steps must be taken when an appraiser has a prior relationship with the property? Disclose the relationship to the client. Disclose the relationship in her report. Contract sales price. Market data that is not always equal to market value. Management section ethics rule covers. Page 9 conditions of compensation and assignment acceptance, advertising, use of signature. Compensation. An appraiser must disclose anything of value received with the procurement of an assignment. Unethical compensation. Compensation that is of a predetermined result, directing results to favor the client's cause based on the amount of value opinion based on a stipulated result, events directly related to the appraiser's opinion and specific to the assignment purpose. Appraiser paid fees to procure an assignment. Must be disclosed in the report, certification and transmittal letter, not necessary to disclose the amount. Advertising and signature. An appraiser may permit his signature be placed on the assignment results by another appraiser, must not be false, misleading, or exaggerated, must certify USPAP acceptance with signature. Is it ethical to reduce the appraisal fee due to loan not closing if the client agrees to pay more for other assignments? No. FAQ 37. Management section ethics rule fees cannot be contingent on the amount of the value opinion. FAQ 39. Confidentiality ethics rule. An appraiser must protect the confidential nature of the appraiser-client relationship. Confidential information or assignment results may only be seen by the client, parties authorized by the client, state regulatory agencies, third parties authorized by due process, an authorized peer review committee. When is client authorization to release confidential information not required? When the information is modified through reduction or aggregation, such as when a current client asks to see examples of the appraiser's prior work and all that the confidential information and results have been removed. Physical characteristics. A description of the subject and other properties that can be shared with other appraisers unless identified as confidential by the client and are not available from any other source. They are not assignment results. Physical characteristics. facts not based on opinion and address age bets versus outdated or functional obsolescence. Work file record keeping rule ethics rule. Name of client and intended users, true copies of written reports, summaries of oral reports of testimony signed and dated, all data to support the appraiser's opinion, all information sufficient to produce an appraisal report. How long must a work file be retained? At least 5 years and 2 years after disposition of judicial proceedings, whichever is longer. Competency rule comment. Requires recognition of and compliance with laws and regulations that apply to the appraiser or to the assignment. The appraiser determines the scope of work including assignment conditions given the intended use and users. Competency rule being competent. An appraiser must determine prior to acceptance of assignment that they can perform competently. The ability to identify the problem, knowledge and experience to complete the assignment, recognition and compliance with laws that apply. Self-assessing competency. The appraiser must determine if they are competent to complete assignment. Competency rule acquiring competency. Disclose the lack of competency, take all steps necessary to complete the assignment competently, describe lack of competence in the report and the steps taken to complete assignment competently. Competency rule acquiring competency comment. Acquire competency by personal study, ask a knowledgeable appraiser, ask others who possess the knowledge. If the assignment cannot be completed competently, the appraiser must withdraw. Scope of work rule. Page 14. Identify the problem, determine scope of work, perform scope of work for credible results, disclose scope of work in report.